I'm just an ordinary mom who just thinks in terms of, I don't want to someday be holding my grandchildren and watching something horrible happen and feel like I didn't do anything. And I mean, it's obvious what you're doing. And my question is, on a practical level, where do you see the most practical place to put your energy? I mean, tonight I feel in overwhelm, like I feel like it's too big, it's too much to even make a dent in.
The way things change is because lots of people are working all the time. And, you know, they're working in their communities, in their workplace, or wherever they happen to be, and they're building up the basis for popular movements which are going to make changes. That's the way everything has ever happened in history, you know, whether it was the end of slavery or whether it was the democratic revolutions or anything you want, you name it, that's the way it worked. You get a very false picture of this from the history books. In the history books, there's a couple of leaders, you know, George Washington or Martin Luther King or whatever. And I don't want to say that those people are unimportant. Like Martin Luther King was certainly important, but he was not the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King can appear in the history books because lots of people whose names you will never know and whose names are all forgotten and who may have been killed and so on were working down in the South. When you have activists and people concerned and people devoting themselves and dedicating themselves to social change or issues or whatever, then people like me can appear, and we can appear to be prominent, but that's only because somebody else is doing the work. My work, whether it's giving hundreds of talks a year or spending 20 hours a week writing letters or writing books, is not directed to intellectuals and politicians. It's directed to what are called ordinary people. Yeah. And what I expect from them is, in fact, exactly what they are, that they should try to understand the world and act in accordance with their decent impulses, and that they should try to improve the world. And many people are willing to do that, but they have to understand. And in fact, as far as I can see, in these things, I feel that I'm simply helping people develop courses of intellectual self-defense.
What did you mean by that? What would such a course be?
I don't mean go to school, because I'm going to get it there. It means you have to develop an independent mind and work on it. Now, that's extremely hard to do alone. You know? The beauty of our system is it isolates everybody. Each person is sitting alone in front of the tube. You know? It's very hard to have ideas or thoughts under those circumstances. You can't fight the world alone. Some people can, but it's pretty rare. The way to do it is through organization. So courses of intellectual self-defense will have to be in the context of political and other organization. And it makes sense, I think, to look at what the institutions are trying to do and to take that almost as a key. What they're trying to do is what we're trying to combat. If they're trying to keep people isolated and separate and you know, and so on, well, we're trying to do the opposite. We're trying to bring them together. So in your local community, you want to have sources of alternative action. People with parallel concerns may be differently focused, but at the core, sort of similar values and a similar interest in helping people learn how to defend themselves against external power and taking control of their lives and, you know, reaching out your hand to people who need it. That's a common array of concerns. You can learn about your own values and you can figure out how to defend yourself and so on in conjunction with others.
Are there one or two publications that I, as an average person, a biologist, can read to bypass this filter of our press?
Now, if you ask what media can I turn to get the right answers, first of all, I wouldn't tell you that because I don't think there's an answer. The right answers are what you decide are the right answers. Maybe everything I'm telling is wrong. Okay, could perfectly well be, I'm God, but that's something for you to figure out. I mean, I could tell you what I think happens to be more or less right, but there isn't any reason why you should pay any attention to it.
What impact do you feel alternative media is currently having or could potentially have? I'm actually a little more interested in its potential. And just to define my terms, by alternative media, I'm referring to media that are or could be citizen-controlled as opposed to state or corporate control.
You know, that's what's kept people together. To the extent that people are able to do something constructive, it's because they have some way of interacting. I mean, I've always felt it would be a very positive thing, and it should be pushed as far as it can go. I think it's going to have a very hard time. There's just such a concentration of resources and power that alternative media, while extremely important, are going to have quite a battle. It's true there are things which are small successes, but it's because people have just been willing to put in incredible effort. Like, say, take Z Magazine. I mean, that's a national magazine which literally has a staff of 2 and no resources.
Tell us a little bit of Z Magazine, what it is and what makes it different.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Thank you.
We just wanted to do a magazine that would address all the sides of political life: economics, race, gender, authority, political relations. And we wanted to do it in a way that would incorporate an attention to how to not only understand what's going on, but how to make things better, what to aim toward, and to provide at the same time humor, culture, a kind of a magazine that people could relate to and could get a lot out of and could participate in.
And what we wanted to do, which we didn't think was provided by the existing magazines, was to give it a real activist slant so that it could be very useful to the variety of movements in the country. And we just felt there wasn't a magazine that reflected that inspired people and that gave people sort of a strategy and perhaps even a vision of how things could be better.
South End Press has sort of made it. That is, they're surviving. It's a small collective, again, with no resources, and they put out a lot of books, including quite a lot of good books. But for a South End book to get reviewed is almost impossible.
Editorially and business-wise, we make decisions based on a politics that no corporate publisher can really advocate because of their ties to corporate America. We can solicit manuscripts based on what we feel is the relevance for the movement, and we can make our business decisions based on whether we feel people can afford our books, whether we feel that a book might not make that much money, but it needs to be out there, and maybe there's 1,000 people who would buy it. And those are criteria that we feel are very precious in this day of corporate mergers.
Well, and likewise our structure about sharing work and continuing our training process as long as we're at the press. There are losses there in terms of productivity, but in terms of empowerment, all of us are then able to say, my perspective is different from yours, then all of our intelligence gets used in making those decisions, and not just whoever happens to have done it the longest, whoever happens to have graduated from the best schools in order to be the best editor, making all the decisions and only using his or her intelligence.
Listener-supported radio in the United States has undergone a remarkable growth in the last decade. It's perhaps the fastest growing alternative media. There are many reasons for this. First and foremost is that it's enormously economical, and it reaches communities that have not been served by community radio before. And in Boulder particular, we see with someone like Noam Chomsky, who's been there, I believe, 3 times in the last 6 years, he has a tremendous audience, and KGNU is partly responsible for that because we play his tapes on a regular basis, we play his lectures and his interviews, so when he does come to Boulder and people hear what he has to say, they're able to tune in. It's not something exotic or esoteric that he's talking about, it's material that they're very familiar with, and he's noted this, incidentally.
I mean, if there's a listener-supported radio station, that means that people can get daily, every day, a different way of looking at the world, not just what the corporate media want you to see, but a different picture, a different understanding. Not only can you hear it, but you can participate in it. You can add your own thoughts, you know, and you can learn something, and so on. Well, that's the way people become human, you know. That's the way you become human participants in a social and political system.
Hello, I'm Ed Robinson, and this is Non-Corporate News. What is non-corporate news, and why is it necessary? I didn't want to just show another film at a library or something. I wanted to make my own statement. I thought it would be more fun to do. and perhaps I could get other people involved in a project besides showing a film. We could make a film or a video. The local cable station's hooked up to 3 communities: Lynn, Swampscott, and Salem. So that's 30,000 people, or 30,000 homes, I'm not sure, but I'm sure a lot of people will see it, and they'll be the kind of people who don't go out to see a film. They'll go right into their houses, so if they're flipping through the channels, they might be able to get a completely new idea of the world.
So there's kind of networks of cooperation developed, which, I mean, like here, for example, is a collection of stuff from a friend of mine in Los Angeles who does careful monitoring of the whole press in Los Angeles and a lot of the British press, which he reads, and does selection, so I don't have to read the movie reviews and the local gossip and all this kind of stuff, but I get the occasional nugget that sneaks through, and that you find if you're carefully and intelligently and critically reviewing a wide range of press. Well, there are a fair number of people who do this, and we exchange information.
We wrote this, a 2-volume work, which we saw one another for a couple weeks when we were getting started, but then we wrote 2 volumes, essentially, without seeing one another, just by phone, by mail, and exchanging manuscripts. But this takes a lot of communication by mail. My Chomsky file is a couple of feet thick.
The end result is that you do have access to resources in a way which I doubt that any national intelligence agency can duplicate, let alone scholarship. So there are ways of compensating for the absence of resources. People can do things. Like, for example, I found out about the arms flow to Iran by reading transcripts of the BBC. And by reading an interview somewhere with an Israeli ambassador in one city and reading something else in the Israeli press. Now, okay, the information is there, but it's there to a fanatic, somebody who wants to spend a substantial part of their time and energy exploring it and comparing today's lies with yesterday's leaks and so on. That's a research job. And it just simply doesn't make any sense to ask the general population to dedicate themselves to this task on every issue. I'm not given to false modesty. There are things that I can do, and I know that I can do them reasonably well, including analysis and study, research. I mean, I know how to do that sort of thing, and I think I have a reasonable understanding of the way the world works as much as anyone can. And that turns out to be a very useful resource for people who are doing active organizing, trying to engage themselves in a way which will make it a little bit of a better world. And if you can help in those things or participate in them, well, that's rewarding.